Welcome to the Trombone Corner podcast, where we feature interviews with trombonists from all over the globe. It's great to have you join us as we talk all things trombone, brought to you by the Brass Arc and Bob Reeves Brass. This is your host, Noah Gladstone from the Brass Arc, along with some help from my friend, John Snell at Bob Reeves Brass. Today's special guest is Adam Woolf. We'll get to his interview after a word from our sponsor.
Hello, loyal listeners. This is John Snell, co-host of the Trombone Corner. Since its inception in 2010, the Brass Arc has been the trombone community's go-to destination, offering a platform for the trade of both contemporary and classic brass instruments. Noah Gladstone, the visionary behind the Brass Arc, has tirelessly worked to bring innovative products to the forefront, leveraging his extensive network and partnerships. This includes an array of lead pipes, cutting-edge trombones and bass trombone designs, and, notably, mouthpieces. In a landmark collaboration, Bob Reeves Brass, renowned for over 5 decades in crafting premium mouthpieces for professional trumpet players, joined forces with Noah in 2015 to create a line of trombone mouthpieces. These mouthpieces are a fusion of historical elegance and modern functionality, tailored for today's dynamic musicians. Crafted with precision and care, each mouthpiece is a product of skilled handiwork, exclusively made in the Bob Reeves factory here in Los Angeles. Our diverse collection caters to a variety of instruments, including alto trombone, bass trumpet, both small and large tenor, bass trombone, and euphonium. We also offer custom sizing and exclusive artist signature models from celebrated musicians like David Reyano, Jay Friedman, and Martin Schippers. Discover more by visiting brassarc.com or trombonemouthpiece.com. And for the latest updates, follow us on Instagram at The Brass Arc and at Bob Reeves Brass. Back to you, Noah.
Wow, well, that was a really great ad read, John. I'm glad to have finally relinquished after multiple episodes here and mix it up a bit and get you to do the ad read for once.
It's not as easy as it looks.
It is not.
I had great inspiration. I had a great teacher, so thank you for that.
My pleasure. Well, what's going on over at Bob Reeves right now towards the end of the year here?
Well, it's the holidays, so we were just, you usually take some time off between Christmas and New Year's, some well-deserved time off. But, well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for making 2023 a banner year for us. The places we went to Japan, we went to ITF in Salt Lake City. It seems like every couple of weeks we turn around and we were someplace else on the globe, and it was a lot of fun. As much as we like being at the shop, it's great being in front of people, and looking forward to 2024, just as much travel, if not more so. I'm looking at TMEA in San Antonio in February. We're looking at ITF is going to be back in Texas in, I think, end of May. We're looking at a Europe tour, maybe Australia. So, and of course, everywhere we go, we bring everything and the kitchen sink included from the shop. So make sure you follow us on social media because we'll probably be in your neck of the woods sometime soon. If not 2024, maybe 2025. So
you may even bring me
getting out on the road. Yeah, you're welcome to come along. If you weren't so busy.
Well, we'll see. I'm going to try to make at least a couple of those.
With all the other things you do. Speaking of which, you gifted me your friendship the last episode. And I want to mention again, a big shout out to Megumi Kanda. That was an excellent episode. We got a lot of great new subscribers. But for those who listen to that episode, you gifted me friendship, and I sent you a little gift.
You did.
For those of you watching the video version of the podcast, did.
Yeah, well,
Kiss Me, I'm a mute freak t-shirt.
I guess I said that in one of our earlier episodes, and you remembered that, and you made me a shirt. So here's my Kiss Me, I'm a mute freak shirt. I believe that is the first shirt ever written like with this design on it in the history of mankind. So I feel very special to accept your gift. And the dog is barking in the back.
Well, we had the cat left last episode. Now we have the dog. And yeah, I hope that folks appreciate my lovely graphical design which is a little embarrassing because our guest today also does that much better than I would ever pretend to.
Indeed. Who is our guest today? We have Adam
Adam
Woolf.
Woolf.
I'm so excited
Yeah.
to have Adam Woolf in the trombone corner today. Really a big
It's
fan of his playing.
Going to be a great episode. Before we get to Adam, anything you have going on at the Brass Arc?
Well, like I said, it's the end of the year. It's been a great year. I appreciate all my clients and friends and colleagues that have been coming into the shop and buying instruments, selling their instruments through my services. I had really great horns come in and out of the shop this year. It's still a lot of fun for me to connect with people and to have all of these vintage instruments and give them a platform and find new homes for them. So it makes me really, really happy to just continue to do that at the Brass Arc. So thank you everyone to our listeners for supporting us and for supporting the podcast. It's been fun to get all your feedback, and I'm really, really, really just chuffed that everybody loves the podcast so much. So who knew that there was so much to talk about the trombone, but I learned something new every time. So thank you very much for all that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, although over the break we will be driving captaining one of our 9 yachts that we have, from, for our lucrative podcast business. But really, I mean, it's the fulfillment of getting this information out there, giving these artists a platform to speak. It really, end of the day, and then at the end of the year, looking back at what we've had this year is really amazing. And we wouldn't have it without listeners. So thank you for listening and being a loyal Trombone Corner listener. So with that, let's get right to our guest. Let's get to Adam's interview, shall we?
Let's do it. Adam Woolf is a celebrated musician and academic renowned for his tenure with leading classical music groups such as the English Baroque Soloist under Sir John Eliot Gardiner, His Majesty's Sackbuts and Cornets, and the Cecilia Concert. His academic contributions include professorships at prestigious institutions like London's Royal Academy of Music and the Conservatoire in Utrecht, Brussels, and Amsterdam, focusing on historic performance and Baroque trombone. Woolf's versatile performance career also extends to modern ensembles, including the London-based Marty Brass, and ventures into jazz and contemporary music. He has recorded over 100 CDs and DVDs, including notable solo projects like Song Without Words. Woolf is also an accomplished author with publications on historical trombone performance practice, enriching the field with his expertise. It is a real great pleasure to have Adam in the Trombone Corner today.
All right, joining us from across the pond on the Trombone Corner is Adam Woolf. Adam, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thanks a lot for having me. It's fantastic to be here.
And I'm sure we're going to go a lot of different directions. But let's start from the very beginning. How did you start playing? Did you start with trombone? Was that your first instrument, or how did you get started in music?
Well, I come from a really musical family. My dad was a keyboard player, a pianist, and organist, and clarinet as well, and sax. My mum played the piano, and so the house was full of music all the time. And, they found it really important that, at an early age, I should learn to play something. So I got started on the piano. And, 4.5 or 5 years old or something like that. And, I really liked it. I got to that point when the coordination, I'm not sure what it was, but it started to be a bit less fun, let's say. And, I kind of was looking to other instruments. And the same way, my dad being a clarinetist, I grew up with virtually every evening hearing him teaching clarinet lessons in the living room. So that kind of convinced me that I didn't want to learn to play the clarinet. I did try, but there was just something about that. Maybe it had to be a brass instrument. So we had lots of different styles, and Dad was playing at cabaret clubs and things like that, and practicing at home, electronic organ, and he was a jazz fan, so there was always plenty of trombone to hear. But also with his musical background, had a big interest in classical music too. So it got to the point where I was thinking, okay, what can I do that I can basically do in as many places as possible? What would be the most versatile instrument? And it just had to be the trombone. I'm not sure exactly why it wasn't the trumpet. I'm not sure why Oh, well, the horn was too difficult, and you kind of knew that at the time. But so yeah, it was the trombone, and that was pretty much. I started learning at school, and had a few lessons on a terrible instrument where the slide was just awful. I think that's kind of standard sort of
Was
initiation,
it
isn't
a
it, for trombone
was it a
players?
Boozy and Hawks or a
Yes,
Besson? It was a Boozy and
it
Hawks,
was
of
a,
course.
it was a Boozy and Hawks. I can still remember the smell of the case when I opened it that first time, and even that didn't put me off. So yeah, so I brought this trombone home, and I could get a sound, and it kind of having played piano for, well, I was 11 by this point, so having played piano for 6, 7 years, could read the bass clef already, and it just felt like such a luxury to only have to do one thing at a time. And my teacher at the time in school was a trumpet player, and he just seemed to have as much fun as I did really in the lessons. I think it was nice for him to be not teaching trumpet players as well, and we got on really well. And it was an important time in life, I think, where going through high school, and there's a lot of pressures coming at you from different directions to do well in new subjects, and somehow music felt always like coming home. So it was a really special thing to be able to do, actually, and to spend that time just learning something because I liked it, not because I was being told I had to.
Mhm.
So that was
Who were
that was my starting.
who
Yeah.
who were some of your early influences? You mentioned obviously in your family, but were you listening to trombone
Yeah,
players or other brass musicians?
yeah, very much. I mean, Don Lusher was one of the first people I heard play in a way which was really prominent. I mean, his solo albums, or solo trombone and strings and that kind of thing, and just the way he played melodies and things, and that was that made a big impact on me. This idea of sounds that can be so different. I grew up in the southeast of England, where we don't really have a big brass band sort of culture.
Hmm.
Lots of wind orchestras. I was following, I was listening to brass bands that time on the television every day. There were, I think it was called Star Brass. There was a BBC program which featured different soloists coming on playing with different bands, and it was just amazing. And I remember Don Usher being on a couple of those, and others as well. Um, yeah, and then I was listening to a lot of jazz. Irby Green was definitely the first person I remember hearing and thinking, hang on, but like 4 bars ago you sounded like this, and now you sound like that. And this is the same guy with the same instrument. And that was a real sort of moment of, wow, this thing can do quite a lot. So I think my first influences were very much from that kind of musical background, and it got to the point where Dad would come home with his books full of they were called the Busker books. It's essentially like the real book kind of idea, a melody and some chords and some words, and that's it. And he'd sort of always be picking out tunes to play with me, and so we'd play these. We'd spend evenings just going through these things and say, "Oh, you should try this one. You should try this one." And he'd sort of try and pass on stuff he'd heard other people, trombone players doing at work when he was playing with brass toe, and trying to do it like this and copy these sounds. I mean, the Bond films were coming out. So this was the 80s, and lots of great melodies coming out there as well. So just trying to play like those singers that were singing some of those themes. And I think that was, that was kind of the formulation of, okay, connecting this trombone playing habit that I was getting into with actually, a musical kind of aim, I suppose, and making music.
So there wasn't a one particular moment where you just said, "This is what I want to do with my life." It just kind of organically developed, you'd say.
Yeah, it kind of, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was also count myself as really lucky. We had a very active and varied youth music service in the county where I grew up. So basically, every night I was either doing a wind orchestra or an orchestra or a jazz band and small band, big bands, or doing or quintet, brass quintets, doing a lot of different types of playing throughout the week. Um, and that kind of just grew up around me. And I think, there was I do remember a conversation when she was, I think, writing the check for another term of trombone lessons, and she sort of said, "You like doing this, don't you?" And I was like, yeah, you know what, I think I do. And she said, well, have you thought about actually doing it, and going on and trying to do it for a living? And I don't think it had even crossed my mind. I think even the fact that Dad was out and doing gigs every night and working a lot, and I think maybe even that put me off a tiny bit. But somehow there was that romantic side of the whole lifestyle, the whole gigging and traveling and performing that really really appealed. So there was a conversation when I kind of do remember thinking, yeah, I'm going to try and consider this now and see and look more into it.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, you never know. I mean, you have plans and you have dreams, and I probably also wanted to be an astronaut at some point, and that didn't happen. So
I wanted to be a garbage man, but it never really.
that's cool.
There's still time.
Yeah.
There's still
I
time.
know a guy, Noah. I know a guy.
I thought it was so well. Back in the day, they would ride on the back of the truck, and I always thought that was very exciting as a young child. But they don't do. It's all automated now. The arm comes and grabs. It's not as much. It's not as romantic as back in the day. That's great. That's great. So you decided you were going to be more serious about this and give it a go, and then I take it. Got into school, started doing the whole school thing, and then how did that all develop, and how did you choose which school to go to, and all of those things?
Well, there was another really defining moment was one of these youth bands that I was attending every week, every Friday evening. Wind orchestra was they had like 3 levels of band, and going to the junior one. So I was there for about half an hour. They pulled me up, and there were never enough trombone players. So I had to go and play the next one up, and you sort of get stuck in this thing with much harder music. And I was like, "Wow, what's going on here?" And the conductor, after a couple of weeks, came up and just sort of said, "You enjoying the band?" We had this chat, and he'd always, been really helpful to the trombones, and I didn't know who it was at the time, but it was a man called Alan Hart, who certainly many UK trombone players, that name will mean something. He was in the RPO back in I think the 70s, and in the Royal Opera House. He was around when they were doing some recording with Pink Floyd and the Beatles as well. And he had that serious career. And little did I know that this was him who was conducting our band. And he sort of said to me at one point, who'd you study with? And so what? This awesome guy in school, a trumpet player. And he said, well, we thought about having specialist lessons from a trombone player. Of course, I hadn't at all. And he also, so I looked at the equipment I had, which by that point I had my own instrument. It was a Constellation, which my parents bought me when I passed one of my first exams, and I still have. Still actually, I just love playing it. Actually, but he said, if you want to do this more, then we should think about instruments. And the whole discussion was had about whether I should, and we decided we'll do that. It turned out Alan had so many students who had gone on to become successful players, and just a totally awesome teacher. So I started studying with him every week, and these instruments. And then he had connections to the Royal Academy in London. He'd been there. When it came to sort of deciding where to go, he sort of said, "Well, my kind of bias is for the academy, but do check out the other schools as well, because they're all great. There's lots of good things going on." So when it came to it, he sort of prepared me for the audition, and I did audition for 3. I did audition for the Guildhall. I showed up for the Guildhall, and we lived about an hour from London, so it could have been worse, but it still felt like a big deal going up to London to do these auditions. Showing up for the Guildhall, best suit and everything, and I remembered everything I said about don't play too much before the audition and all this stuff. Went in, and for my feeling, I played the best I could have done, and I came out really happy with it. Got through to the second round, which was like a, I guess, kind of an academic sort of interview. And I thought, I've got this. This is going to be fantastic, because I had some friends at Guildhall. It'd be great. 4 or 5 days later, letter in the post. Sorry, but we're not giving you a place. And I was kind of thinking, okay, so that's 1 down, 2 left to go. But still, the academy had that kind of. Went up to do the college audition, made the fatal mistake, I'm sure, of just playing too much beforehand. Didn't play my best at all, and came back from that really quite sort of down. And the next day, a letter in the post, would love to offer you a place. And I was by this point thinking, what's going on? How am I supposed to know whether I'm coming or going? So then went to the academy, where by this point I'd done the open days and things, and I also felt something really sort of special about that place. I had friends there as well, and they're all three of them fantastic. But the academy, I really liked. Went in, got warmed up, not too much, waiting for the audition, and someone comes in and says, I'm really sorry, your accompanist hasn't shown up or hasn't been booked. I'm not exactly sure what had happened there, but we don't have an accompanist for you. You're going to have to do the audition just completely on your own. And that was kind of a slightly overwhelming thought, really, to go in and play some of these pieces with no sort of covering fire at all. And so I was just going in, and there was another guy doing an audition waiting outside, and he said, oh look, my accompanist's here, maybe you're playing some of the same pieces. And it turned out we were doing like a couple of the same pieces. So I was saying, well, thanks so much. I've never rehearsed with this guy, didn't know what to expect at all. So I went into the room. He sort of started, I think Saint-Saëns Cavatine was the first thing I did, and he started, off we go, let's just see how it goes. Dudley Bright, who was to become my teacher, was in there, and he, just before I started, said, oh, by the way, sorry, if I have to leave in a couple of minutes, don't be put off anything. So I was thinking, okay, great. No accompanist. Now the panel's getting up and leaving. This is just, and I think the fact that I was so distracted from myself, it kind of went quite well. And I don't remember whether I had to play anything on my own in the end, but it became the academy. So they offered me a place, and yeah, I was just so happy. That was at that point it had become a dream to do that. So yeah, I went to the academy, showed up that was, I suppose, about a year or so before I started there. I showed up, and sure enough, my roommate for the first year, who was the trombone player who I bumped into before my audition. He got in as well, so we had that already sort of on our side. So it was, yeah, that's how the academy got chosen or chose me. Yeah.
Amazing. And then, so what was your time like there? Did you study with Dudley right there, or did you have other teachers?
Yeah. It was an amazing time. I mean, we had John Wallace was the head of brass at the time, and he started that year as well. And he kind of came in and said, right, okay, everyone's got to do as many different things as they can. I want all you brass players, I want you to be doing, light music, contemporary music, early music, 19th century music, orchestral, and be aware of different instruments. I really want everyone's eyes to be open. Super energetic place. I was basically playing 13 hours a day every day, and then trying to find time to practice sometimes as well. It was just so busy. And I studied with Dudley. The two tenor trombone teachers were Dudley and Ian Barstow was there as well. And in my year, we had 5 tenor players, which was quite a lot by those standards. That was quite a lot to come into one year. And so we were split between those two. And it was interesting, I'd sort of arrived in London wanting to do as many different things with the trombone as I could. I guess I had aspirations of freelancing and doing recording sessions, playing light music, West End shows, musicals I really wanted to do. I had so many things I wanted to do, and I went into my first lesson with Dudley, and he sort of said, okay, how do you think you're doing? And I had no idea what to say. He said, right, sound. Your sound is your passport. We've got to work on sound. And we spent a long time on basics and sound. And that was really an interesting time to sort of confront, really, for me to think about, okay, where am I with this thing? I mean, I know I can sort of imitate certain ways of playing, but really there's not a foundation. So I had that going on all the way through my first, 2.5, nearly 3 years. I was with Dudley, and he was just basically every lesson. It was the same basic, the techniques, the sound, giving me the setup. I did have lessons with Ian as well while I was there. Totally different approach. Mm-hmm. First lesson he said, "So what have you been doing with Dudley?" And I kind of told him, And he said, "Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. What does that actually mean then?" And I realized then I couldn't actually put into words what it was I was trying to, what I learned at all. I just couldn't find the words. So they were really, really complementary to each other as teachers. Totally different approaches. And of course, I also studied for in fact, for the whole time I was there, I studied with Sue Addison, who was the sackbut teacher at the academy at the time. And that started very unusually from about the second week I was there. I seemed to be able to skirt around the normalities, and somehow it always seemed okay to let me do that. So even though there were various things, first year shouldn't do it, we need to establish a decent modern trombone technique, and I just kind of, also I think part of me was a bit rebellious and was like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. The instruments are there. So it was a fantastic time. I played so many different types of music, so many different instruments. I had exposure to so many different players. It was just it was a fantastic 4 years. Really amazing.
Amazing. Would you mind talking a little bit more about the sound, working on your sound, the kind of thing? So we've had players talk about that before, where it's okay, we're going to develop my sound. Can you talk about some of was it the exercises? Was it just the listening? What did Dudley have you do through those first few years to start developing your sound?
I think that the thing that he passed on, which, I mean, almost every lesson I had with him, I carried with me and been able to take things from so many of his approaches, even when I've been teaching and playing very different repertoire to the kind of stuff I did with him. Essentially, we were using cello suites and lots of things just as vehicles to then address certain things like tongue position, open sound. What does a tongue do? Getting over these sort of misconceptions of, well, tongue harder. You can't really do that. It's a combination of the air, the tongue, and the coordination of those things, and how important that is. And we talked about certain players who hardly used any tongues, some who used more, but at the end of the day, where the tongue needs to be to make an open sound. And he taught me to listen to what was coming out of the bell as well in a really analytical way. So I could, even if I couldn't do what I wanted to do, I could usually work out why I couldn't, which helped me to then sort of find a way there. And some aspects of playing more successfully than others. But that was a lot of what that was. It was really just sort of like, play the trombone, play the relatively simple thing you might have to play, but play it as perfectly as you can. And don't worry about the fact that you're not warming up on a super F or playing, sort of 5 minutes of 16th notes without breathing. So I think it's fine. Just get that sound going. And that was, as I say, that was very strong influence. And it also complemented very well the different approaches that the other teachers around me had.
Yeah. Fascinating. And then, and you mentioned, so you started taking lessons on sackbut. Was that your first introduction to sackbut?
Yeah, it was. I'd heard it a couple of times. I'd heard one before I got there, and I remember after my interview, I had this another sort of academic interview, and they said, "Well, we'd love to offer you a place. We've got these sackbuts here. Would you like to have a go on those if you came here?" I said, "Well, of course, I would say yes to anything." Like, yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, what do you think? What do you think it should be then? What do you think the sackbut is like? So I just made up some answer, which probably I think it wasn't 100 miles away from what I ended up doing with it, but it was I knew what the idea of it was, but I'd never played one, and I picked one up in the first week. There was one. We had this. There's a room in the academy behind the Duke's Hall, which is the main concert hall. There's the band room, which is basically a corridor lined with lockers. And like, as I now know, a lot of music conservatoires, certainly in Europe, there's never enough practice room in these places. So that band room was, when I was there, was the brass faculty practice room. So you go in there and you might have, horn players practicing Strauss and tuba players playing goodness knows what, trumpet players playing any number of things, and everyone in this small space, and there were trombone players all sort of having a go at whatever studies or Mahler 3 or a bit of Bolero from the other end. It was just, a cacophony of well, noise really, and there were so the instruments were left there. So I had played around on the sackbut, and I remember the first time I picked it up, just thinking, what on earth is this? How am I supposed to do anything on this? What's it supposed to sound like? I just had no idea whatsoever, which is fair enough, And I had I ended up playing the sackbut because I got invited to play in a group at the academy, because my first week there was in the orchestral administrator's office, and they said, "Hey, we've got this gig on Thursday, modern brass fanfare thing. We need another trombone player." And I tossed a coin, and I won it. So I got to do the gig, and on the gig was a student, and it was the opening of Warner Brothers Cinema in Leicester Square or something, and it was a film. I think The Fugitive and Harrison Ford was there, Princess Diana was there. All these people were there. I was like, "Mum, Dad, you'll never believe it. I've been in London 4 days, and here I am." And one of the other trombone players who was, I've made it. That's it. That's it. I've done it. 4 days. One of the other trombone players said, we've got these sackbuts and we've got these 2 cornetto players, and we want to make a group, but we need another player. Would you like to do it? And it was really from having won that sort of coin flip, that coin toss, that actually got me into doing that whole thing, because of course. So got me into some coaching sessions with Sue, and then quickly into some lessons as well. So I'm sure I needed them. So it was, but I remember that first time picking this thing up and thinking, wow, it kind of rewrites the whole way that I could have imagined some of that music would need to be played, for better and worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's one of the most satisfying things when I get to do historic performance is just getting to hear the music as close as it could be to what it was. And then once you do it, then you go back to modern instruments, and then it's kind of like, the personalities all kind of changed. It's different, not necessarily. And it's fun because the instruments are the same. They haven't changed really that much, but they really are quite different at the same time. I just, a lot of people, sell a lot of sackbuts obviously at the shop, and a lot of older people kind of seem to be buying them lately just to get kind of into a lot of people are interested in historic performance. And what kind of advice do you have for people that are coming from a modern instrument? I mean, obviously the first time you play a sackbut, if you haven't played one before, it just comes out super fuzzy and weird. And it's like getting to the pure essence of the sound takes some time. So how was it for you, just juggling back and forth between modern studies and then, playing sackbut and not ruining one or the other?
I think I think you've hit on some really, really good points there. I mean, it is essentially the same instrument. And we have this thing as trombone players, like brass players, that the sound you make is the one you have in your head, and you kind of pick up a variety of instruments, and you're kind of going to sound like you. You just have the same kind of musical personality. As much as we try not to do that in many cases, but still always, we have our ways of doing things, don't we? I think it's totally possible to combine the 2 instruments, to play the sackbut and to play the modern trombone. And of course, there are different ways of going about that. There are people who would, pick up a sackbut and use a modern mouthpiece. Well, that's okay. I mean, why not? Essentially, the musical language is the same. It just comes down to whether the tool you've got to do it with is going to actually deliver what you want as efficiently as you need it to in the acoustic you're playing in. And the same could be said for modern instruments. If you choose a studio setup or something to play in a massive reverberant concert hall, so I think the main thing to do is just do it. That's the most important thing, is just to get the instrument and to decide whether you can get on with the pros of it. I mean, it's a narrower bore than a modern trombone, so breathing, it has to be done slightly differently, but you can play longer phrases on a sackbut because it doesn't take away as much air as quickly. And I think the main thing is to look for reasons it's not working. Don't fight it. Don't try and make it do what it doesn't do. So, over-articulating, let's say, to talk really broadly about these things, over-articulating, don't need to use as much as heavy articulation on the instrument, even with a modern mouthpiece. And then if you get onto the Baroque mouthpiece, which definitely has benefits when you're, for example, playing in a church, it gives you the clarity of articulation without working as hard. I think, yeah, I mean, if it's not working, if the sound's not coming, then there might be a reason for that. And often it can be too much pressure with the mouthpiece. With that flat rim, if you press too much, it's game over. You end up with a range of a fifth, and then quickly disappears. But that's often a telltale sign to maybe habits which are there on the modern trombone as well. And so I think they can be really good for each other. I used to pick up my con after I've been playing the sackbut and realize that even if I was a bit nervous or a bit tense, somehow it helped with the sound, and the sackbut wouldn't do that. So the sackbut was a good way of trying to really think, am I relaxed here? Is my posture good? Am I breathing? Am I pressing too much? And those things, when they worked on the sackbut, would really help with playing the modern trombone as well, for me. So it could be that, for others, if they do find that they're just not getting on with it, then just take a minute to work out why, how you might be able to change that. I've had quite a bit of feedback from students along the way saying stuff like that as well. It's helped them to relax. It's helped them to focus their sound, I suppose, but not to press as much. To rely on the air more. Be a bit less worried about exactly what mouthpiece they're using, but to do more with the actual things you do every day, your breathing. I mean, it's, I don't know. That feels like a kind of a really roundabout answer.
No, I totally agree. I think, for me, it was like accepting that it is a sackbut and that's what it's supposed to sound like. And then once you accept that it's not a modern trombone and you have to approach it a little different, then you can kind of start to grow into the instrument and just not expect results immediately. It takes some time and just like you said, playing in an ensemble, especially just playing with cornetto players, especially for me, it was like just they have to play with no pressure because just nothing comes out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so hard of an instrument. You learn so much by listening to the other musicians in the group, especially in early music, where it is it's not as refined of a sound in the modern sense, but it is more of an essence of the sound. And I for me, that was kind of the really exciting thing about historic performance and getting to have a dialogue with people rather than just, you're in an orchestra that you're not having a dialogue, but it's a little different. There's a conductor, there's the process of, a traditional recording, whereas early music is very much of a collaborative, individual, everyone is a principal experience. Totally.
And you're looking for different things. You have a chance to exploit different aspects of the instrument as well. You're looking for completely different ideas and what have you. And in fact, just about this whole compatibility thing, that was a thing, a bit of a thing at the academy when I was studying. And I know that for others that was the case, but it was seen as being something which could damage your modern development on the modern trombone. And I get that. I do get that. I think any playing with a bad technique, it brings any kind of bad habits in with you, of course, for everything you do. But the reverse is also opposite. And it's also true. The reverse is also true. I remember I had a call from Dennis Wick. He was basically said, "Look, I'm going to republish my trombone technique." I realized that what I wrote about the first time was probably a bit out of date now. So can we have a chat? Yes, of course. It was an honor. So we were talking about this, the equipment, and he said, "Actually, would you mind bringing it down to show me? Come down to the house with it." So, okay, fine. And I don't know how long he'd been not playing for by this point, but he picked up my sackbut with my Baroque mouthpiece, and he played. He said, "No reason why this should be a problem for anyone. Just don't press so much. Don't do this, that, and the other. All the things which are bad habits we know on modern brass instruments as well." And kind of cemented my belief that actually it's fine. If it's not going well on one, it's probably not going as well as you think on the other one as well. So it's all healthy. Yeah.
And we're lucky there's such good instruments now. I think back, in the 60s, 70s, those old replica sackbuts that are really just kind of nothing, very low quality instruments. it's no wonder why they got such kind of a bad reputation. A lot of the modern makers now make such fine instruments. They're really a joy to play.
Yeah,
It's
totally. And we know more about, what we're trying to do with them. Things have, evolved, fashions have evolved as well. Also, we're talking about cornetto players, but, you know, there aren't two cornetto players on the planet who play the same way. And I think, I think it's maybe safe to say the general global move from the cornetto being a trumpet player's instrument to now being, certainly in Europe, lots of recorder players playing it.
right.
It's doubling. So not coming from a from just because it's another lip reed instrument. It has other qualities, and that's influenced the way of playing as well. And we're learning more about how to make things work together. So I think that's placing different demands on sackbut players as well,
Yeah.
which is
And
great.
and there's so much repertoire from the period. I mean, the trombone was the most popular instrument of the time.
Yeah,
We were ubiquitous.
yeah,
So I just, it's just repertoire on repertoire on repertoire. You'll never play the same thing. There's church music and non-church music and everything in between,
yeah, yeah.
for
That's
300
it.
years, and then it just disappears. So, um, fascinating. So after school, we took a little sackbut detour there, but I'm sure we'll come back to it in a
Yeah,
bit. But what
That's the
what
other
did you?
podcast, Noah.
Oh yes, the
yeah.
sackbut
We have
corner. I
we
forgot.
have the
Yeah.
the
Sackbut
trombone
corner.
corner, and the sackbut detour. That's
The sackbut
that's our other.
detour. I
That'll
like
be the
that.
other. Yeah,
I need a shirt.
trademark it.
Yeah.
Trademark
Okay.
it. That's
Yeah.
coming.
Okay. So what did you do after school? After school, you graduated, and did you start working, gigging right away?
Yeah, I mean, I was basically doing all the way through school as well. I mean, I was doing still a large sort of cross section of work. Just freelancing. London's got so much going on, and again, the southeast had lots of choirs. There was always choral society concerts and things. I was basically doing a lot of different things, and I started to pick up more, let's say, work more based around London. Um, I got invited to play with the group that my sackbut teacher, that Sue, was in, His Majesty's Sackbuts and Cornets, and I started to sub in that group. Um, Met those guys and everything, and that kind of opened doors to other things, and that kind of part of my career was starting to grow. And when I left the academy, they offered me a job in the group. A position came up, and it was like, well, do you want to do this? So I was like, of course. And of course, that kind of helped to push me more in that direction. Meanwhile, I was still, I always played in the brass quintet. Always played in the quintet. I love it. It's great fun. I love being a third trumpet or a first tuba or trombone or second horn or whatever. Just that kind of that kind of approach to different roles you have to play. So I was keeping that going as well. Trombone quartet. Doing orchestral freelance work. And I guess I got a bit, I had fallen quite a long way into the historical performance scene, and started playing with some of the orchestras, the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment, for example. And then about 3 months after I left, after I graduated, uh, I got invited to go and sub on a couple of recording sessions with John and Gardner. And we were recording Baroque cantatas in Abbey Road. And this was another one of those, hey, Mom, you never get thing. What are you doing? I'm playing Baroque cantatas. What's that? It's sort of, it got me there, got me to Abbey Road. Got me to Carnegie Hall as well. So, that's how you get there. No, it was, so I think, looking back, it all happened quite quickly. I kind of, shortly after I started playing with those groups with Gardner, it was a question of a few tours, and then I got invited to have that position there of first trombone as well. So I had that, and I had His Majesty's Sackbuts and Cornets, and then the King's Consort, and there were some other period instrument groups around, which was quite a full diary actually. And I won't say I didn't lament sometimes that I didn't have time to do the other things I wanted to do on the trombone. It was kind of missing the, the modern orchestral playing, for example. but you can't do everything. And I was very happy to be doing what I was doing as well. So yeah, that kind of, I got so busy doing that. And of course, and a lot of that work is touring because the concerts don't tend to be in the UK. So we'd maybe do a handful of rehearsals in London. British musicians famously don't rehearse that much, and then go to the airport and off you go, and then spend the whole time on the continent or in the US, playing concerts, having a great time actually. And well, what's not to like? So don't look a gift horse in the mouth and all that. Hey, it's that was ended up being my thing. And then when I was back in London, I'd spend what time I could playing with my chamber groups there, doing various different things. So looking back, it did all kind of happen quite quickly. But I never had a period from the moment I arrived in London. I never had a period when I wasn't busy with something. So I guess it's kind of in my nature just to look for things to do.
Yeah, and it sounds like it. Like you enjoyed touring, but it's also, people kind of forget the physical demands of touring. I mean, did you have any issues when you were on the road a lot with your chops or keeping a routine with your playing, or did it just kind of come natural to you?
No, I think everyone has issues with that kind of style. I think it's difficult not to. It depends what kind of player you are. I never had a fixed routine for warming up, for example. I never had a sort of 45-minute, have to do this every day before I play. And I think that came from the fact that I was always playing different instruments. I mean, you got the modern trombone and the sackbut, then with Gardner playing lots of alto trombone. And then with him, with the orchestra there, playing Valve trombones and German trombones, French trombones, you get very comfortable with not quite feeling 100% on an instrument. And that kind of, I think, helped with the touring, because I would be doing trips with players who didn't chop and change as much as me, and they would struggle if we had a day off, for example. They'd put the or be at a higher altitude, or fly somewhere where it's suddenly much colder, and it doesn't feel like it did yesterday, type of feeling. And I think, and for me, that's almost every day. It's you're only ever prepared for the thing you just finished doing.
Could you imagine being an oboe player though, and being on tour? Like, it must feel awful every day because those reeds are so temperamental. So I guess we have it pretty lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And we do have we have the time on tour as well. I think we tend to be able to maintain things. And it's not to say I didn't do maintenance do the day-to-day maintenance on the playing, but it was always things which were related to kind of general well-being, I think. So, for example, breathing. I mean, my whole philosophy for playing was always the instrument runs on air. If you don't have air, then there's nothing to follow that, and you need to do that every day. But the same can be said for traveling. If you have bad posture when you're traveling, carrying cases around, then you're not going to last either. So, trying to maintain an awareness at least of that. And I studied a bit in London when I lived there. I started doing personal trainer diploma just to get more, because I was really interested in the physical side of how muscles work and why, and that really helped as well. It helped me to see some parallels, which kind of saved me from those moments when you show up and you go on stage and you just feel the back of your shoulders aching from carrying things around, or often sitting hunched over, crammed in the back of a long haul flight. So yeah, maintenance definitely super important to do, but it comes in different shapes and forms, I suppose.
And then, I mean, you brought up all the different instruments you'd have to play. I mean, if you were playing like sackbut for a long time, would you need to then practice your other instruments? How did you deal with that? Did you have a schedule, or is it just based on what gigs or tours you had coming up?
Well, I think I was quite lucky that I didn't really do a lot of work at short notice. So I could always look in the diary and say, okay, I've got 3 weeks of being on the road playing alto trombone in Brahms Requiem, but I know when I come back from that, I've got to do something else, which required a completely different approach to the instrument. So in cases where I could get it all on the plane, I could take instruments with me and try and keep things going and be prepared when I got back. But there were definitely times when I just simply couldn't have the instruments I needed with me, and then you really rely on flipping this mental switch of, okay, this is now the sound I need to make. This is how I need to approach it. Try not to get distracted by the fact the mouthpiece feels different, because it will. And try and work with what you've got with you all the time. As I say, try and imagine the sound and the approach. And by and large, that was kind of how I got through. Certainly when things started to not work, if I was ever on the road and feeling bad, I don't think practice would have helped. It was more often than not a case of just, okay, step away from it, have a think about what's going on, come back to it, pick it up again, and then put things back together again in the situation. And it more or less worked to work like that.
And you were teaching students this whole time too, I'm assuming, as well, back and forth while you're touring, and then teaching, and then coming back and teaching, and like that's also a challenge too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, teaching, that's when you start learning, isn't it? I mean, I remember showing up to arriving, because the thing about my teaching was I never had a regular teaching position in a country that I lived in. So I was always traveling for hours before I got to the first lesson. And I'd arrive there, and even when I taught in London, taught at the Royal Academy, I was living in Belgium at the point. So it's a 2-hour train journey. It's not a massive commute, but it's not around the corner. You can't do the warm-up at home and still feel it when you get to work. And I think you have to choose your battles a bit. If the first student shows up with something ridiculously difficult, then I just be honest and say, look, it's 9:30 in the morning. Can we come back to this a bit later? Or just be realistic. There's no secrets, I think. And there's always something that you can do that's productive as well. When it felt better and it was going good, and of course play a lot, and that was also an important part of it. But I learned a lot about how to approach things then, and pass it on as teaching with all the traveling involved as well. Yeah.
And what about like hobbies and stuff? Were you doing other things besides trombone playing too? I'm sure. And you're writing books, and you're publishing books and other things, computer related and things like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess the closest I came to a hobby that I regularly practiced while I was doing all that was probably cooking and eating. I mean, again, what's not to like?
That's a good hobby.
Yeah, it's I realized, I used to sail a lot with my dad. We used to go sailing. I always wanted to get back into it. I realized at some point it's just not going to happen with the crazy lifestyle. That's not going to happen. Looked around for some other things, clubs to join. Never really managed to make it work. I was always loved taking photos, so I've always been very interested in visual arts. So would do that when I was traveling. Of course, traveling presents a fantastic opportunity for doing that as well, and going to different places. And then doing these operas in Paris, for example, where you're staying in these little apartments. There's plenty of time for planning meals and going out and buying the stuff and cooking it and enjoying that side of life as well. It's a great way to relax.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the pandemic, because you actually kind of went through a bit of a career change coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So let's jump into that, because I find this really fascinating, and I want to make sure we touch on this a bit for our listeners.
Well, yeah, okay. So pre-pandemic, so 2019, I was traveling a lot, teaching a lot in, say, like at one point in 4 different conservatoires in 3 different countries, and doing concerts and doing tours and things. And I've always been interested in doing other things. I've always been interested in learning languages or technology. I was always the one in all my groups where if there was a brochure, pre-website days, if there was a brochure that needed designing, printing, it was me that got to do it. And or then when websites came along, okay, who's going to sit down and learn how to do it? I just loved it, actually. I thought it was a really interesting thing to do. So 2019, I was sort of starting to think, well, maybe, it's great. I love doing what I'm doing, but I'm doing a lot of it, and it's excluding me from doing other things. And I always found that a shame, that to specialize in one thing, be it one style of music or one entire profession, should be exclusive, and prevent you from following other interests, let's say. So I was starting to look more at design, graphic design, and opportunities there, and thinking, well, maybe, I also knew lots of freelancers, lots of people who wanted to have help getting themselves set up. I'd always run my website, I'd always done that type of thing. I thought, well, I can maybe help other people to do that. So I started to look into ways of setting myself up, like just a sideline, just something that would be interesting and maybe eventually would replace some of the traveling and allow me to pick and choose a bit some of the traveling I was doing. And that was kind of all there was to it, really. It was a nice feeling when I made that conscious decision that it's okay to do that, and I shouldn't feel that I have to keep this quiet. It's nothing to certainly be ashamed of. It's nothing to sort of to try and hide. It's a complementary set of skills, and I didn't know at the time how complementary. So that was that, and then went on tour February 2020 in the States. Actually, we played New York. And all my days off between shows, I was learning how to write better code so I could build better websites, better applications, just because I thought, it's a fun thing to do. Having also spent more than 20 years writing musical arrangements and loving how you can write, 5 lines of code, let's say, and it can sound so amazing. I thought this is quite nice. I quite like this. So I was doing that more and more, and then of course, I got back from that tour. We last concert was Chicago, Beethoven 6, put the instrument away without realizing that would be my last orchestral concert, and basically my last, apart from the coronation this year in London, it was my last public performance. And the pandemic hit, and I think we all had to look for other things we could do. Not having any fixed salary positions, everything relying on so much traveling. It was very difficult to try and see a way back. And also, even when those period instrument orchestras, when they started up again, I knew they wouldn't be doing that larger repertoire with trombones. I had plenty of other things they could get going more slowly with. So, I just sort of thought, well, maybe this is sort of a gift I kind of hadn't expected to get, but I had all this time. And I carried on studying coding and web development, and just to see what would happen. And in the end, made a complete change. I've never said I won't play. So I did go back in May to London and play this year, which is fantastic. But it just seemed like the right time. And one of the things I did in that pandemic was a platform for musicians who were setting up sidelines to get themselves through the pandemic. But we need something where the public can go and know they're supporting a musician or someone when they're buying their Christmas presents or looking for a plumber or a accountant, what have you. And I've got the skills to do this. So I wanted to do that, and it felt really good to do, to sort of just step out of a world in which I'd been so immersed, and to realize that now when I go to work, and coding is my full-time job. I still teach on the side, but coding is my full-time job. I can listen to any music I want, not just trombone repertoire. So that's quite nice. Again, a little perk I hadn't seen coming. So that's basically it was just a question of timing. I'd been considering ways of changing the lifestyle a bit, and there's never enough time, is there, to do these things. So suddenly there was.
Yeah. Well, and I really appreciate you talking about that, because there's almost like a stigma about having a day job, or you're giving up something to have other interests, and there's plenty of great musicians out there that do other things, and it's there's more to it than just standing in front of people playing a sackbut or trombone or trumpet or whatever what have you. But can you talk a little bit about the coordination, because you did play for the coronation? Were you in shape, or did you have to get yourself back into shape? And it's not like that was a big gig or anything. No one was watching, right?
I gotta say, I saw the German trombones and organ and choir, and I was like, how cool is this? Yeah. Like, front and center, the trombones are the star of the show. I just thought it was the coolest thing.
I know. It was so okay. So again, pre-pandemic, my last concert was with John Garden, and that's the outfit with which I worked the most throughout my career. And he kept asking me for projects when they got up and running again afterwards. But by which time I couldn't really fit the long tours in the diary. I just couldn't do that. And I saw him about a year ago, and he said, "Look, would you please come back and just play for us?" And I said, "Well, I just can't. You know, it's impossible. I can't afford the time." And then this email arrived in February, and it was like confidential. Would you be free to do this one date? And I thought, you know what? It's a Saturday. This is perfect. I work remotely in the day job. I can even go and do my day's work in London, go and do the rehearsal. It's the perfect crime. I can't say no. The only problem was I hadn't got any instruments by this point, because basically I'd sold most of them during the pandemic to pay the rent. So I was in this situation. Well, okay, What have I got left? I've got a rotary valve trombone, which I bought to play Verdi Requiem with the orchestra. Awful instrument. You've got a choice of 2 or 3 fingerings for each note, and it's going to be sharp, flat, or split. Probably it's terrible thing. But I kind of thought, okay, I knew what the piece was. I knew what the section would be. That was also very important, that it would be those guys, because they're just legends to play with. And I just thought, well, I can't say no. I mean, apart from it being that date, musically, it had everything going. We always had this. I always had this thing. You've got to tick 2 or 3 boxes. Either got to be great music, great people, or great money. And if you get 2 of those, then that's the reason to say yes. And this ticked all of those and more. It was. So I had this rotary valve trombone. I thought, right, what am I going to do with this? Because I can't really practice anything like slide coordination. But I kind of thought that was probably still going to be there because I've been doing it so long. It was more about, again, just being able to breathe and articulate and string the notes together once I sort of started. Get the coordination between the air and the tongue, really, just to produce the notes. And I practiced that thing for a couple of months. I put myself into a really safe space where I was happy to rebuild the career to do that piece, to play those things. Knew what I had to do, and I was very realistic about it. And some days it would be awful, and other days it would come, and it came back quite quickly. It was quite a methodical way to rebuild things. And I met Miguel and James, the other trombone players. Because we hired these German instruments, but they were in London. I couldn't go to London around that time. I hadn't been travelling, so I met the day before the first rehearsal. We got these instruments out and we just played, and it was just like no time at all. It was amazing. And one of these things which I always had when I was practicing at home felt so much more difficult than when I actually got with the music. It just kind of carried you along. So yeah, we played the piece for a few times and tried a few different speeds, and that was it. And then on top of that, I'd said to everyone, look, it's at 9 o'clock in the morning. The main coronation doesn't start till 11. So when we're playing, there are going to be cameras all over London showing Buckingham Palace and showing what's going on outside. You're not going to see us. It might be, they might dip in and out, but especially on a Bruckner motet, there's Bach, which the orchestra's playing. There's other things going on. And I came off stage. We came off stage, turned the phone on. Of course, there's just photos from everyone, and they'd televised the whole piece on some channels at least, And I just, I had my mother-in-law, ironing, washing the bow tie and everything. I would say, it's going to be fine. She said, no, you can't go out like that. And there I was in the middle of the TV. Of course, also then with a load of messages. Oh, you playing again? You coming back? You playing again? So I had to go through that conversation again with a few people. But like I said, never say never. And not if there's another coronation, but well, maybe, or anything else. I'm not to say it shouldn't be exclusive just because you do one thing, and it's just nice to be able to be creative and to have different outlets. It's very healthy. I think.
Yeah, and I love the way the German trombones sound too, because they're like big sackbuts, kind of. So they're so similar.
Yeah,
and the sound
but
is it's that very different.
Yeah, it's that thing about you need to know what the sound is you want to make and what you're there to do, and then make it do that. Don't try to do anything else on it that it's not supposed to do.
So did you see the King at all? Did he say anything to you guys like, hey, good job, trombone players, or anything like that?
We did. We played. Yeah, we played for him quite a few times actually in the past. And he's a real music fan, and he always likes the brass. And we rehearsed that motet as he came in. He was supposed to be there for 15 minutes in that rehearsal because he knew he wouldn't see it on the day because he'd be elsewhere getting ready. So he said, I can't miss this. I have to see it. He showed up and he sat there for 90 minutes in the rehearsal in the end. And they started with our piece as he entered the room. And we finished, and then John had said some words to him. And he was, oh, thank you, trombones. Okay, we'll do the other pieces. And we were getting changed, putting the things away. And he said, come and say hello. So we went and had a small chat with His Majesty in front of the orchestra as well, which was nice. Yeah, it was great. Just a chance to say thank you for he's a great patron of the arts, and to say thank you for all of that, because we need that. It's so important to keep that support going. So
just incredible.
Had a little chat with the king.
I mean, I was just bowled over. I couldn't believe I'm seeing trombones and choir like in the front and center. I just thought it's the best thing ever. Just the best thing ever. And my favorite thing I've ever seen on YouTube.
Yeah, crazy. And the pieces before it, they played these 3 Bach cantatas, which were very happy, joyous, festive pieces. And basically the congregation and I was all chatting all the way through that. And because there was a scene change, because then the orchestra left and we stood up, it kind of gave an element of expectation, something. Now this is the real gig. So
it's just
complete
epic.
silence
it's just
when we played.
So epic. Yeah.
It's crazy.
I love it.
Yeah.
What a great gig, man. Super awesome. Awesome.
It was good.
Terrific.
Hard to top that one.
Hard to top that one. Yeah.
So Adam, I want to talk to you a little bit because you've been on over 100 albums. Any of those recordings particularly stand out to you in terms of either something that happened in the recording or something I know they're all like a baby, it's like choosing your favorite child. But of all of your recording history, is there any particular albums that stick out to you?
I think I'm going to say it's probably, it would certainly be the chamber music albums that I did. And certainly some of them with the quintet. I joined a group called Mardi Brass Quintet, and we dreamt up this idea of we want to do a CD called Something Old, Something New, Something Borrowed, Something Blue. And I think at the time I said, well, why don't we do 4 CDs? And that kind of ended. Of course, the project lasted 4 times longer than it should have done and cost 4 times more. But the point was that we were writing a lot for those recordings, and we were sort of going off to a farm where we recorded in the middle of nowhere. And it was just, I think they were really special sessions because we were playing each other's arrangements and new music where we had the composers there. And maybe that also brings to mind some of the new music we did with the sagbuts as well. But working with people who had written the music and seeing how they gave feedback and how we got to sort of shape the pieces there and then, really. And to feel that we're doing something new. Because it's great to sit and record, another Brahms Second Symphony, and the music's just awesome. But to put something on a CD that you think people might hate is quite an interesting feeling. And to find out that so many people love it, and with that, there have to be people who, for whom it's not to their taste, and that's fine too. But I think those moments of creativity, you're really putting something together for the first time. It was a really special way to work, actually. And then on top of that, the ones we did with Cecilia concert, lots of 17th century, really quite virtuosic music, pushing the boundaries of what we were able to play as players and probably what they were doing back in the day. Hopefully, leading the way to future projects that we then went on to do with that group and maybe inspired other people to do those. So, yeah, I guess that the kind of the more unusual repertoire and recordings definitely.
Well,
definitely
that's what I love.
Is there go ahead, John.
No. Jump in, Noah.
Well, I was just curious to kind of piggyback on that. Is there a piece that you've played in the repertoire orchestrally or motet or anything that is like you love it so much? If it comes up on a program, you're like, I would do it just to play that piece, even though I've played it, 100 times. Is there a piece that like you just love it? You never get tired of it?
There's a Bach cantata. It's actually a funeral motet. It's cantata. The number is 118. So Jesu Christ means Lebenslicht, which is scored for. Well, there was an outdoor scoring he made for 3 trombones and cornetto, and then 2 litui, which people have done research and come up with different ideas about what that actually is, whether it's a kind of wooden trumpet or just a long trumpet, a B flat Baroque trumpet. That's a special one, without doubt. Just to get to play those lines, I mean, all those Bach cantatas that use trombones are fantastic, but the fact that this one, again, the sonority is so much, brass, and
Right.
it's just a gorgeous piece. So it doesn't come up that often, and it's not particularly easy, but it's amazing. Yeah, amazing to play.
Get to play something by Bach is originally for our instrument is always a treat.
Yeah. Also, yeah, that's it. That's true.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, Adam, I wanted to ask you in terms of like when you're doing the historical performances. I mean, what kind of preparation, outside of just the playing, like in terms of the ornamentation and the improvisation, goes on behind the scenes?
That varies slightly depending on what the group is and what the repertoire is as well. And even with a lot of preparation, things like ornamentation are completely spontaneous, and a lot of the time, and things can happen that you'd never thought would do. Of course, the worst thing, I mean, I've done a lot of improvising, very different styles and things over the years, and the worst thing that I realized that you can do is to go out with a preconception of what you're going to do. So I'm going to play this phrase, because then if just somehow it doesn't feel like it fits, you spend the rest of that time in that piece or that solo thinking, how am I going to go back and try and get this thing in, or regretting that. So just to let things happen. But that side, there's a lot of preparation to make sure that if you're planning a project with the early repertoire, you've got considerations like what pitch you're going to play at, where you're going to record it, if you need an organ, what type of organ. Try and get those things as correct as possible as well. Acoustics too. Instrumentation, of course, as Noah said, you're playing these instruments with any, it could be any different type of ensemble, with strings or with winds, with brass, with singers. So it's different pretty much every time, from project to project. So when you conceive a program, you have to think about what you can use and how you can get different colors from the instruments. There's quite a lot. And of course, when it comes to then running through some of those arrangements, those transcriptions, editions, however we refer to them, they don't all work. So then you have to sort of, okay, what can we do with this piece? Transpose it up or down, to be totally happy with the fact that we know they did all these things then as well. So I think, that's very important as well, to be confident to say, well, we're musicians now trying to play this piece with these instruments. That was the same 400 years ago. So they must have arrived at some conclusion, and so will we. And that's as authentic, for want of a better word, as as other aspects of playing. So yeah, a lot of that. And then when you get and play, you see what happens. Trying to be creative. Yeah.
But I like that, not having a preconceived, especially with the ornamentation or the improvisation going in. It's,
Yeah.
kind of take it as it comes, and not getting because if you're on a track and you get sidelined, then all heck can break loose.
Yeah.
But
that's it. Yeah.
And I know you do, like you've done jazz improvisation stuff. Was there ever a gig where you slipped in like a sharp 9 or sharp 11 or something on a Baroque gig?
Definitely. There's been the odd bit of bluesy things happening, and I mean, it's a passing note, isn't it? Until you get to where you're going, it's all part of the freight. So
I'm sure there was some sackbut player 500 years ago that did it too. So
exactly,
maybe not.
Exactly.
They were, who knows?
All within the realms of taste, let's say.
That's right. Well, thank you, Adam. I mean, we're coming up to about an hour here, so we don't want to keep you too long. But I just wanted to say thanks for coming on the Trombone Corner and being a great guest and sharing your insights with our listeners. Super interesting. I'm a big fan, and really appreciate it.
So fantastic. Great to see you.
And Should mention your website, right? AdamWoolf.com, and Wolf with 2 O's. You have
Yes.
some of your music for sale. People can buy your books and CDs
Yeah,
still, right?
that's it. Yeah. Find out a bit about what I'm up
Awesome.
to. Yeah.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we
and
have links to all that in the
website
description.
development and all of those things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's it.
So,
Yeah.
Absolute honor to have you on, Adam. Before we let you go, if we could ask you one last question, if you could leave our listeners with your best piece of advice, and it could be about anything, doesn't have necessarily have to be sackbut related or music related. What would that piece of advice be?
Never stop learning. Never lose beginner's brain. That kind of thirst for seeing something you don't understand and still wanting to find out more about it. I think it's easy to see, to be surrounded by things that we don't know about. And because we don't know about it, we kind of get scared of it or lose interest. But yeah, go out there and just learn. Just learn about as many things as you can. You might be surprised how many things are complementary and actually relate, which you would never have thought.
Absolutely wonderful advice. Great. Again, Adam, honor having you on here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot.
And we'll see you on the next coronation.
Yeah. It's a deal.
Man, that was such a cool interview, Noah. Like, I love Adam. Like, such a fascinating guy. And, just to think about like the wealth of information and that like hundreds of recordings and the stuff he's done. Really,
he's so
really
humble
cool
too about how much he's accomplished, and just a total normal fellow, and obviously incredibly intelligent. So real inspiration to hear his story, where he came from, where he started, and all the great stories. And I mean, that coronation story is just out of this world. So I'm so glad he told us that to our listeners today.
Well, I had no idea that he had basically, I don't want to say retired, but had stopped playing through the pandemic, and he had just picked up just to do that gig. So
makes it even more impressive.
Yeah. Well, and also I love how honest and open he was about just, doing other stuff. It's okay. We're ingrained at such a young age. Music, perform, and that's it. It's that or nothing. And actually, I think Megumi had the same advice about finding outside interests and defining yourself in other ways than just trombone or sackbut or trumpet, whatever the case may be. So very refreshing to hear. Oh,
absolutely. Awesome.
So
what do we have next on the Trombone Corner? Some exciting stuff.
Well, we're doing the special collab with the Third Coast guys, right? The Trombone Retreat podcast. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about those guys.
Well, Sebastian Vera plays in Pittsburgh, and Nick Schwartz is a bass trombonist in New York, plays in the Met. So excited to have both of those guys. They also have one of the top trombone podcasts on the internet available, in addition to ours. And it's been something we kind of been talking about for a while. Sebastian's been hitting me up to come on their show, and we saw each other at ITF earlier this year and said, hey, what if we do a crossover collab episode, and we'll post it on both of our podcasts, and it'll be fun, and we'll kind of have a roundtable discussion with those two guys. So we'll have the joint hosts of both interviewing each other for our own podcast. So it should be really, really fun. And
I'm a little nervous. I'm going to be outnumbered.
I'll
chime in with my I'll chime in with my soprano trombone quips, and that'll then I'll just move back to my corner.
And your quirky wit.
Something like that.
Exactly. It's going to be great.
Can't believe 2023 is over. Thank you again to all of our listeners. Thank you for listening and subscribing and coming up to us at shows and sending emails. It really means a lot to us. And here's to even bigger and brighter 2024. Noah, it's been a pleasure.
Cheers, John.
Cheers. I want to see that shirt at the next party. Okay.
You got it. All
right.
Maybe we should make a holiday sweater.
Holiday sweater. Okay. That'll be next.
I'm a mute freak holiday sweater. I love it.
That's coming up next. Thank you all for listening. Until next time, keep on sliding.